Good afternoon and welcome back to Maker's Bar. It's your guy, Seth Garu Baxter with Maker's Bar, where we're creating 1 million leaders today for tomorrow. Today we have a special guest, and actually I'm extremely pleased, particularly for the line of work this official has in his capacity. We have Youth Commissioner Ricardo Ortega, and Maker's Bar is extremely pleased to have him with us today. Commissioner, thank you so much for joining us on Maker's Bar. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, our pleasure. Thank you for making the time for us so we can hear you share your story and some of your insights. We are looking forward to this conversation.
Likewise.
Fantastic. So, Commissioner, if you don't mind, we'll start and jump right in from the beginning. Give us a little background about where you come from and where you were born, your place of origin, and your upbringing.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me once again. My name is Ricardo Ortega. I grew up mainly in LA County, in Southeast Los Angeles, bounced around from home to home, different foster home. So I mainly lived in Huntington Park. That's where my roots came from. That's where I started my career. And then I graduated from Marco Antonio Fireball High School in the city of Linwood. And then I moved up here to the Antelope Valley, more specifically the Cortez area. And very excited to be here, represent this community with diverse needs and diverse asks from our elected officials.
Fantastic. Were your parents into politics? Were they, political interested persons, and or did they run for office? Where did your political aspirations start or begin?
No, I am the only one in my family who likes politics, who's involved in politics. Most of my family are more on the artistic side, and so I was the outlier in that perspective. And so for me, it was, I started looking into politics back in 2018 when I was 8 years old, when Barack Obama was elected president, and I saw someone who was in position of power, and I started looking into the different levels of government and what they represent. And so I knew for the first start that I wanted to be in public service. I didn't know what that meant. I knew that I wanted to serve people and help people who went through the same struggles that I did. And so one of the main ones that I looked at was Secretary of State Hillary Clinton at that time, and just exploring and traveling the world, representing our country. And that was one of the positions I wanted to get into. And then slowly I started looking into the Supreme Court. I wanted to be a associate justice, and enforcing the law, making sure that everyone has an equal day in court, but also making sure that there is a voice in our judicial system. The more that I developed, um, I got exposed to different levels of government in different positions. And so my family never really knew how to talk to me about politics or how they felt, because I was not an area that they were exposed to. And even culturally, we are taught not to ask for help from government, not to trust government, toughening it out and moving forward. And so it was something new for my family to adjust as well. And so it was a very interesting time to be a young person with no background or exposure to how to maneuver this conversation.
And so, youth commissioner, how did that come about, that particular position?
Yeah, so I'm in my about to be fourth year as a commissioner representing District 5. That came about through an opportunity through one of the supervisors who exposed me to apply. And so they asked, one of them was Supervisor Solis, and also her staff, informed my brother, hey, this opportunity is coming up. You should have him apply. I did apply, I did my interview, and then I was officially appointed by the Board of Supervisors of LA County. And this opportunity has given me a lot of um, exposure to allow other young people to represent their community in an official capacity, learning how to maneuver the different bureaucracies that comes with this position. And it's a very unique position where you get to work with from our beaches and harbors, all the way to our sheriff's department, probation, housing. And so this is a very unique, complex commission where you can actually advise and create new systems to making sure that young people, the 2.2 million young people that we represent, have an equal voice and an equal seat at the table.
2.2.1 million, you said?
2.2.
2.2. I'm not sure. Now, I know, but I'm not sure our audience might be in full understanding of what a commissioner's role is, in particular, youth commissioner. If you wouldn't mind, can you go into some of your duties so they can understand the breakdown?
Yeah, every commissioner has their way of structuring themselves in this position. Some commissioners are very involved and very active in the decision making process or in reaching out to different county departments. But basically, our role is an advisory role to the board of supervisors, to the five that run our county. And so every commissioner has the flexibility to use their position to allow their district and their constituency to grow in their specific areas. And so every commissioner can reach out to their county services providers in their area and their district. But our objective, our goal, is to making sure that county departments have the right tools and access to resources so that they can provide services to young people across our county, making sure that there's equal access among the five senatorial districts where young people can access that. People who are in need, people who are system impacted have access to that. And so my job is to making sure that I'm out in the community gathering information from them on the struggles. And so I'm just an extension of the supervisor in our district to making sure that they have that she has the information to enforce what's already in the books when it comes to law, or to making sure that I hold our county departments accountable, specifically when it comes to funding, when it comes to access to resources. And so it's a very complex position because you can do whatever you wish to do with your role as long as you remain in your constituency capacity of 0 to 29. So that's my constituency. That's who I
Zero.
represent.
Mhm.
And so my position is to making sure that the county creates better accessibility for this population across the county. But more specifically for me, for my district.
Now, some of the resources you mentioned that you're wanting to make sure that they have access to, what are some of those resources? And again, I'm familiar, but I'd like them to hear some of the needs of your constituency and the resources that you're hoping to give them accessibility to.
Well, I think again it depends because LA County is like a state of its own, right? We have
Yes.
so many diverse communities, so many issues that every city has. But I mean, for my district specifically, one of the biggest areas that we're struggling with or are in need of support is on access to jobs, access to extracurricular activities, transportation, and even in some cases, how to address mental health, substance abuse, and how all of that ties into sex trafficking. And for young people, our district has a lot of that. And so how do we as a community, as a governmental institution, come together in partnership with the community and leaders in that space to address those? And so those are the five areas that I'm focusing on in my remaining term: is creating jobs and opportunities for youth, healthcare, accessibility, mental health treatment, and also making sure that we start addressing CSEC in a very more specific way that can bring together the community.
So, is some of this has to do with partnerships, financial, and fundraising? Would I imagine, or is if you wouldn't mind elaborating on that?
Yeah, so a lot of this different areas are very complex. So some of them might be that the funding is already there. So it's finding what community partner is best equipped to address that issue. That's one. The other part is maybe there is not enough information or educational of
Mhm.
awareness in the community to address that. So that might be the second part, right? So it's a very dynamic issue because those are very broad issues that I'm talking about. So it's more of like, how can we narrow it down to accomplish what the community is in need of? And so for us as a commission, how we prioritize that is by doing listening sessions across our districts. So my district, District 5, is always the first one to go into the district listening session. We're actually having one, excuse me, next month, to get feedback from the community about what are those issues, what are some topics that they want us to talk about, so that we can narrow it down, allowing us the opportunity to address them. And so um, the biggest issue is always funding, but we sometimes we have funding, and it's more of like, who is the right leader to lead that effort, or it might be that is more on the accountability part, because maybe we already found money, we already gave it to the nonprofit or the community organization, but maybe they're not implementing the right way. So then that's where I come in and hold them accountable on, hey, we gave you funding for these issues. Where are you at? Why you're not doing it, or how are you doing it? Let me help you brainstorm ways to do that. And so again, if funding is not an issue a lot of the times, it's more of the implementation part of things.
Oh, that makes sense. Implementation due to lack of information, or implementation due to laziness, quite frankly.
I mean, it could be something that can, different organizations have their own ways of processing or interpreting um, the directive or the budget ask, or the deliverables, and so it's more of like, okay, well, this is what it means as a person who was system impacted. Why is it important for you to interpret it in this way, right? And so it's very making sure that these people have an external partner who thinks outside the box, but also thinks of the bureaucracy that they're part of. And so um, that's the part where the importance of the commission with lived expertise, but also being connected to the county, for them to like give them guidance of, this is how you should do it, or if you're not doing it this way, maybe try it out and see how it goes. And so that's the beautiful thing about this commission, is where you can advise in different spaces and not be stuck in one department. You can move around depending on where the need is, dependent on your district.
Now, I'm very curious. Some of the access to travel and mobility, as well as mental health, those are ones that, well, mental health we hear of. I didn't mean mental health. The sex trafficking and the, I just mentioned the access to mobility. How do you address those? Are there specific agencies that the commission has a list of that they hold them accountable? Or is it that they are RFPs? Other organizations request for proposals and or funding, and then you hold them accountable after they were granted the funding. How does that process work?
It's both. So there are these, and there's some that the county does have control or direct control in. But I think for our area, especially for my district, is very unique because I have urban communities in my district, which is like Pasadena, um, North Hollywood, Temple City, and then you go up, and then I have Santa Clarita, which is a suburban community, and then once you keep going up the 14 freeway, then you get into the more rural part of the county. So our area, you might have a bus that can come in around 3, but it takes them to go all the way to another part of the city, like an hour and 45. And so the issue is the frequency of transportation accessibility, but also the fact that some of our communities are in mountain areas. And so how do you address that? And so for us is more of, how can we use different levels of government to ensure accessibility with transportation? And so um, sometimes it's even personnel issues. And so sometimes it's just, we don't have the adequate personnel who wants to work here, or who have the right equipment for driver's license. And so it could be very different things. And so that's why it's not a you can't just put something out there and force them to do it when things that might work in Pasadena might not work here in the Antimo Valley. And so it's having deeper conversations and a more local controlled interpretation of our of contracts or MOUs, or just the county taking a different approach.
MOUs.
Mutual of understanding. So it's like a contract sort of thing.
Now, along those lines, what is your leadership philosophy? What is your leadership style? That's probably an easy way to put it. And in particular, since you're in a role of leadership, how would you describe it?
I think, for me, um, I come from my experiences from background. I started in the state legislature. So I started working in California in the state assembly, wrote my first bill when I was 17 years old, signed into law when I was 18. My
Oh,
second bill when I,
wow.
yeah, so I kind of started with the big monster of bureaucracy, right? And so
Yes,
that's a different level of leadership. That when you
absolutely.
get to that point, working with unions, signing amendments, making sure all that comes through. That has taught me to the leader that I am right now, which now being on the more local leadership role, is to making sure that I am not an expert in everything, right? I am not an expert in how our juvenile halls are being run. I've never been in a juvenile hall, so I can't just demand them to do things. And so my leadership role is um, having an understanding that I don't know anything. That's what I do every single day when when I have meetings. I go in that meeting knowing that I am not the expert, knowing that I don't know anything. So I just go in there, try to absorb as much information. But I see leadership as someone who goes into the community with other leaders and shares the information, communicates the information, and also leads from behind. So I am one person that I that's my philosophy is I want to make sure that people feel equipped to target their own specific area of sector. So if someone is a leader in healthcare, I'm right behind you. I'm helping you from behind. I'm making sure that you are equipped with as much information as possible to address what you're trying to address. But I also see that my philosophy with leadership is making sure that we as a community, as a collective, if you want to be a called and have that title of leadership, you need to make sure that you inspire people. You need to make sure that you create a clear vision of where you want to lead other people to. So you can't just be a leader and just lead blindly. You need to make sure you have a goal, an objective, so that other people and other leaders can sign up to it as well. And so I think that is one very important that we lack of a lot of the times is what does it mean to be a leader and what are those styles of leadership. And so um, coming from the state to the county has taught me a lot, because when you're in the local level, you lead with other leaders, and so sometimes we get egos, right? So who wants to be the leader within the leader. And so um, when I came into this role in this district, I had a lot of that. And so a lot of leaders fighting, another nonprofits fighting with each other. And so when I came in, I was a neutral person. So I'm like, look, we are all in this together. We all have an objective. Let's do it together. Um, and so that's for me what leadership is making sure you have a vision and that you also have an open mind of where you want to go and what you want to learn, and also expressing that, communicating that with other leaders. Like, hey, I'm only here for 4 years. This is what I want to achieve. I want to achieve clear communication. I want to achieve making sure that you all work together, making sure that you all create accessibility for young people to get access to the resources that we gave you money for. So, um, being very upfront, very clear, but also as a leader, you need to take heed. When I first came to this role, I met with all the leaders. I had like over 30 nonprofits coming together and school districts. And everyone said the same thing. You're just another politician coming in trying to be the savior. And it was a lot of frustration. So it was like an hour of therapy. And I was a person that took the front for it, and I have to be okay with that. And so I think is having that capability and tools to be the person who gets all the heat from other people, from other leaders, and then how to move past it and not have that sense of, well, I don't like you now because you started attacking me. And so just having, being able to adjust your environment to whatever that is.
Now, that brings up a very interesting question, in particularly related to leadership style, key issues that are affecting your constituents. And I believe you touched on them somewhat, but if you had to point out specific key issues, what would the top three or what for your constituents?
Yeah, I think for my constituents is very complex, something that for other areas who are more urban, who have more resources, they have, which is access to healthcare. Is one of the biggest ones for me is the fact that our hospital here, if there's a major earthquake, it will collapse. So that is an issue of in itself. How can we live in LA County? How can we live in the fourth largest economy in the world, and yet this community does not have access to healthcare, does not have adequate access to healthcare? Why is it that our doctors have to pull out their phone to show an X-ray to their patient because the Wi-Fi is not working, or because the building walls are not connecting? So, and also the other fact of pediatric trauma center, that's a very big for us. We don't have that. So we have to fly you somewhere else, um, which can be a 30-minute airlift. If you have health insurance, that's great. If you don't, good luck paying that bill. And if we have the wind blowing the wrong direction, we that plane cannot take off. So now you have to take it in an ambulance, which can take you 2 hours to get to LA for that treatment. So that part is very crucial. The other part of it is jobs for young people. In my district, it's very difficult to have access to jobs because the economy is slowing down. It's getting costly to live in California. So how do we address that for young people who are coming from a very traumatic system to now going into being independent and not having a support system around them? And then the third part for my district will say is infrastructure. The fact that we need more infrastructure for our area when it comes to the hospital, but also with transportation and roads. Some of our bridges are not there yet, so making sure that we have access to that and investment in those areas.
Now, I'm very interested. Has the recent surge in executive orders and so forth, have they impacted your community in a harsh way yet, or in a beneficial way?
Um, I think for some community members, it has affected them a lot. I think it's more on the misinformation part
Okay.
of things that have been affecting us a little bit more. Our non-documented community is being affected a lot. In my district, there's been four already rallies around support for our immigrant population. But I think the other part is also that some of our areas are agriculture. So people, undocumented individuals do work there, or people who are on visas, and so that has been affecting a lot. But also the other part is our students, our young people are being affected. Some of them don't want to go to school because they feel like their parent, if they get back home, their parents are not going to be home, and so having that traumatic stress on young people, and some parents even stopped submitting their Medi-Cal insurance for their children because they're afraid that if they release that information and they check the box that the parents are undocumented or illegal immigrants, that the federal government is going to have access to that information, go into their homes and deport them. And so, how do you address those concerns of people who we know the resources are there? We know that there are some protections for them, but it's a lot of misinformation that is going around that is in impacting in a negative way our community members, our constituency. And so that's one of the struggles that we're starting to have, is the fact that there is so many executive orders being released that we're trying to catch up with every single one of them. And how do we know which one's going through, which ones are not? Because some of them might, the court might stop, but some people still think it's going on. So it's just that lack of communication from everyone. And so it just seems like we're all scrambling.
How are you addressing that? I'm very curious. Is this maybe more town hall meetings, or is there more? How here's where we're going to get together to talk about some of these concerns. How are you addressing those?
For me, is again, is going back to leading from behind, right, and allowing those nonprofits, those leaders who they're experts in immigration, they're experts in education law, they're experts in mental health. Is more of like, hey, what do you need from me? You're the expert in your field. How can I help you? And so a lot of the times they're just saying, hey, we just need you to come. Like, we just need you to hear people's stories so you can uplift those stories to the county, to the state, and to the federal government. We just need you to be our messenger, because for some reason they're not listening to us. Maybe because we don't have the title, or maybe because we're too passionate about things. And so that's the way that I've been helping them, is really making sure that I attend those town halls, those healing circles, and just uplifting that information to other partners and other elected officials so that they can have the information of what's actually going on in the ground. And so that is one of the biggest things that I've been focusing on, with that and the fires, and the access to resources when it comes to insurance, and making sure that young people who that were misplaced and who were in foster care because their homes were burned down, what does that mean for them? What does that mean for their foster parent? So there's a lot of things going on that is being hit, specifically with the population that I have.
Now, you brought up something very interesting. How much has the Palisade fires affected your constituency?
Um, for me, I was coming out of the the leadership role. So before um, I was coming from being the co-chair of the commission, and so as a co-chair, my responsibility was to oversee the whole commission in the whole districts. So all the districts who were impacted, and so coming from that into now being transitioning into a commissioner, my district was hit with the Santa Clarita a fire
Mhm.
that happened. And so for me, it was making sure that young people who were in those locations had access to, mental health services, making sure that other nonprofits in the area were, moving quickly to making sure they address our juvenile justice, homeless youth, and foster youth. And so my responsibility was kind of just making sure everything was going smoothly, and uplifting any concerns that I heard to our county department heads, saying, "Hey, I heard from these young people from this place. Can you help them out? They need access to a shelter, or they need access to a physician because they have an asthma attack. And they lost their documents." And so that was how my role was more fall into different places. And so for me, I was like an hour and 45 away to 2 hours away from the fires. So that kind of allowed me that um, mentality of helping other people from far away.
Because you weren't directly in the line of fire, so to speak.
Yes.
You also touched on mental health. How much of an important issue is it, in particular, to your direct area? And now I know here in North Hollywood and some of the areas, having once myself been a person challenged with homelessness. I was homeless myself in my youth. So I'm aware of here directly in LA, but out in your area, how much is that impacting young people? Homelessness, the concerns of homelessness, and the actuality of living without a place to sleep.
Yeah, I think to be honest, it's a very, homelessness is a very complex issue, right? Because you
Yes.
have individuals who have mental health needs, but you also have individuals who have substance abuse, and so some of the shelters do not allow that, or in order for them to get into the treatment, they have to uh, close and kind of commit to stop using their substance abuse. But I think for my district alone, the issue the issue that we have is the fact that we don't have enough homeless shelters.
Okay.
Um, so for me, I think we only have maybe one homeless shelter and one that's an emergency placement. And so for the amount of population that we have that are coming in from LA, um, we're not equipped for it. So we don't have the right amount of beds, the right amount of space and buildings to do and treat all these homeless individuals. And so it is very important for us to making sure that um, we start building up our infrastructure to allow that to happen. And so, but also being holistic of we don't want to create beds. We don't just want to create homeless shelters. We want to create wrap around services and case management support to go behind placing individuals. Because a lot of the individuals that are coming don't have any ties to this community. They don't know what it's like to live here. Um, some of them might just, they took the Metro Link and just couldn't go back. And so, mental health is very big for my constituency due to the fact of the traumatic experiences that they go through. Whether that's being displaced from from their parents and not having that communication, that homes of that foundation of being in a family, and so, how can we address that when it comes to juvenile hall or juvenile justice system impacted? Maybe they came from gangs. Maybe they came from, family who were in violence or who, were going through different traumas. And so, mental health is very big for my community, for my district, due to the fact of how diverse the needs are, but also the environment that young people were exposed to. Um, and so for us is making sure that our mental health facilities have the adequate resources and the right people, the right personnel. Because that's another issue that we're facing ourselves in the county is we don't have enough mental health individuals
Professionals.
who can go and treat our young people. And even the other part, the consistency part, because you might have the right personnel, but then 2 years later they end up going into the private sector, and so you have that issue now of how do you address it, and the young person has to go and retell the whole trauma again to
Oh,
someone new.
wow.
So how do you address that? Is it, and so that's a very dynamic situation of how do you handle these multiple layers of issues that come up from one specific bucket.
I'm kind of curious, is some of it financial that they go to work for the local government and then go into private practice because the allure of having a higher salary? Might that be one of the problems that we're facing in that sense? Or is it
um,
just a matter of burnout?
I think it's both.
Okay.
um, you have individuals who want to stay with the county because maybe the county sometimes have programs for repayment of loans, and so you might have that, or you might have an individual.
Commissioner, if I can beg your pardon, you're light. There we go.
Sorry,
Thank
there you
you.
go.
That's all
uh,
right.
so
Technical glitch. That's okay.
yeah, so we might have that, or we might have individuals who. Oh, there we go again.
This is the fun of a live show.
I've never done these before online. It's always
I
in
think you're
person.
doing great.
Okay, hopefully this time it stays still. And so, what I was saying is it could be two. So the county might have a program where you can repay your loans, and so that's attractive to some individuals, right? And then on top of the salary, but then you might have burnout or just secondhand trauma
Yeah.
um, as well. And so for me, I was also mental health. Like I was in that field before. That was my first job. Um,
If you don't
I
mind
was
me asking, what did you do as far as your first job in mental health? What was your
I
position?
was I was a peer specialist. So it was someone who helped and relate and create that sort of like, I hear you, I understand you. Let's cope together. Let's make sure and also do like case management work here and there. And so I only lasted a year because of all the traumatic experiences of people. And it was right after COVID. It was extremely right
Oh,
after.
wow.
So it was a lot. People were dealing with a lot of emotions, a lot of trauma, being stuck in one place, not having socializing with other people. And so I think is that too, is mental health and dealing with other experiences that you myself might also relate to can also be harmful. And so um yeah, mental health is a very interesting sector to try to address, I'll say.
I definitely can commiserate, understanding that some of the challenge I faced myself as a person who was homeless, living in the parking lots in Venice and the parking lots of North Hollywood. That one of the things I faced was because I could not say I had mental health issues at that time, and this was some years ago. But one of the requirements for me to help to assist me in getting housing was if I had a mental health concern. And
Mhm.
so I find the dynamic between the two very interesting, that mental health is one of the challenges that faces someone who becomes homeless, but then a person who doesn't have those, who is homeless, doesn't get those services. I find it very fascinating. And I hear you when you say it's complex. It definitely is one. Now, along those lines, you mentioned some of the influx of people who are coming toward your area from LA. Is that what we're seeing now? That some of the persons who are without homes in the central section of Los Angeles are taking trains and getting transportation to your area. And so it's creating more of a crowded problem and not being able to be addressed because this was an unexpected arrival. Is that what I'm understanding?
I think one of the things for my area is we have a lot of land, right? We have land everywhere. It's not developed land, but one of the things is, you have people coming here thinking that um, they can purchase a home, right? Or they can, it's still a place where they can purchase. And unfortunately, we're in the case where when I bought my home here in the Antelope Valley, it cost me $470,000 to buy it. Right now, my home is, it went up. It's now close to $600,000. And so I think it's the fact that there is still this mentality, and even with county departments, that the Antelope Valley is just cowboys and dirt, and that's not the case anymore. We are growing, we're close, we're developing very quickly, and so when people come here, they think that they can find a cheap apartment for $900, a one bedroom, one bath,
Yes, sir.
which
Yes.
that's not the case anymore. So you have that, and then you also have the other people who um, someone might have told them, hey, if you go out to Lancaster or Palmdale, they can give you a place to stay because they have a lot of land. That's not the case. Or you might have people who, just someone just dropped them off here. So you have very different
Just
influence.
drop them off.
Yeah, so it could be someone who was suffering with substance abuse and a
Okay.
relative just
Oh, okay.
dropped them off here. Yeah,
Yes, yes.
yeah.
And so a person comes up to the Antelope Valley. They are without a place or shelter. Where would one seek that, or who would they immediately go to?
Um, It depends. It depends on their background. It depends on uh, are they what their age is. Depends on their income, if they have any income. Are they receiving any benefits or not? So it's a very you know interviewing process to see who gets to choose. So
So they would
um,
have to find an agency, an interview with the agency, and that the agency would, it would be dependent upon what their needs are at that time, kind of thing. Is that what I'm understanding correctly?
yes, and there's also something called a housing navigator. So, like, let's say I go into, for example, one of the organizations is called Valley Oasis, right? Let's just say I go into Valley Oasis and I say, hey, I need housing, I need this, I need that. That person fills out the whole information, sends it into the housing navigator, and the housing navigator is responsible for reviewing that form and looking at all the different providers in the region that equipped that individual with the needs. So they can be like, oh, Value says this person is right for you. You take it. You're assigned to this person. And so Value is responsible for completing all of the needs that that person has identified.
That makes sense to me a great deal. Now that brings up some interesting, another interesting question as far as the economic issues you face as a youth commissioner. What are some of those challenges? And we somewhat touched on it a few moments ago, but as far as in your role, what are some of those economic challenges you face for in your position?
I honestly, I think I was blessed to the fact that, I have stable housing, I have a stable job. But I also recognize that some of my fellow commissioners do not have that. And so I think it was making sure that, I can step up and step back as needed as a commissioner to help my fellow commissioners achieve their role. And so, when I first started the commission, I was going through a transition of, leaving foster care. I got appointed to this when I was still in foster care back in 2021. And so I was moving from Lingwood to the Antelope Valley. And in that transition, it was purchasing a home, home shopping, everything that comes with moving. And so I think those were some of the challenges of getting myself situated as a person first before I start advocating for others. Once I situated myself, it was okay. Now I need to know where the landmines are. Now I need to know what my capacity is as a commissioner and how much do I want to give and how much. And so it's more of a personal side of how much do you want to give to this role, and also reflecting on uh, my own personal trauma and how much am I willing to share with other people, and also how much do I want to be vulnerable with other partners too. That's very important because other partners might come and ask you specific personal questions or specific issues, and how I overcame them. And so it's very important that for me, my mental health was ready to go to tackle this. And so I think those were some of the challenges as a commissioner you might have is, do you have a place to stay? Do you have adequate transportation? Do you have food? Do you also have mental health maturity, where you're able to deal with your trauma in the right way? And who's your support system? As a commissioner, as a person who's a public figure, you get a lot of scrutiny. You get a lot of people, not agreeing with your vocabulary or the fact that we're too political. When in their mentality, that was one of the things was other young activists thought that we were going to be activists. They thought that we were going to bring down the system, we were going to burn it down, and even some commissioners came with that mentality, and it was like, well, no, because we're part of the institution now. We are part of it. Doesn't mean we agree with the institution. It means that we have to change our way of thinking from activism to transforming this institution within.
It's
So
so interesting you mentioned that. I'm glad. I want to follow up with that. Please continue. I'm so glad you brought this up. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think that's the important part of, that was another challenge we faced, is other young people who are our constituents were thinking that we are going to have that. And I had to have a sit down with my commissioners, and I was like, look, that is not our role. Our role is to change the system within. That's what you sign up for. If you do not think you can do that objectively, open minded, then unfortunately you're not going to survive in this, because we are unfortunately part of the bureaucracy. Our role now is to how to remove unnecessary bureaucracy from young people to have access to resources, how to make sure that foster youth, former foster youth, have access to um, foster youth housing vouchers. How can we make sure that DCFS is implementing that in the right way? That's a bureaucracy in itself. And now all we're doing is coming in and saying, what are you doing and how to streamline that bureaucracy rather than demolishing it and destroying it altogether.
So you're somewhat, which brings me to my other question, a little like Elon Musk's Doge. And again, we Makers Bar, we pride ourselves on our bipartisan nature. I'm only speaking to the Department of Governmental Efficiency. So youth commissioner somewhat operates in that way. Am I understanding that?
Yes, I think that's one part. I think the we are more again an advisory role, right? And so our role is to check in with different departments. So we have
Yes.
quarterly meetings with directors of DCFS, of probation, of the youth diversion department, of our youth development department. We have different directors and their team come to our commission and talk about, hey, this is what we're doing. These are some of the challenges we're overcoming. What is your advice to address these? And so we give that. We're like, okay, this is our advice. This is what we want you to do. And it's the moment where commissioners can uplift those concerns of like, hey, I met with the constituent who told me this, and this. Is that true? Can you follow up with this person? Um, so that's our role, is more of advising them on how to change their bureaucracy to better provide services to our young constituents that we have. And even also making sure that we communicate that with our supervisors. So the five supervisors, every commissioner gets to meet with them either quarterly and their team quarterly or on a monthly basis to uplift concerns that we have. And so um, yeah, it's kind of like a. I never thought about it that way. Now that you brought it up, like that. The only difference is we don't go into personal data or do all that. Where it's more of like
Right.
stories. All we do is hearing stories and elevating that to the individuals who run those departments and holding them accountable too. That's our other part is we told you
Absolutely.
once, we told you twice. What are you gonna do now? And so that's the beautiful thing about it is that we are able to talk to the supervisors and say, hey, we brought to the attention of this person multiple times. These were the solutions we gave them. They haven't acted on them. So
Yes.
now they are the ultimate boss. They are the main ones. So once they get to that point, they know that we did our due diligence. They know that we communicated, we provided solutions, we did everything, but they're not moving on it. And so when it gets to the supervisor and then the supervisor and her team reaches out to the director, that means that, oh, the commission went and snitched on us to them. That's how it.
Snitched.
Yeah.
Now, you bring up a very interesting point there. The Youth Commission seems to be bipartisan itself, and I think by proxy in the needs of the community that they serve. So they would have to be. But I would imagine reaching across the aisle it can be somewhat of a challenge. And how do you address that? Reaching across the aisle to build a consensus and/or partnerships with people who have some political differences than yourself. Is it personality or is it the funding? We both want to do this. Commonalities. What have you seen yourself so far in being able to reach across the aisle and work together in considering the political environment climate that we're in now, which we both can say, I think, with a smile on our faces, it's not one we've been in before. But I think with that, there definitely comes a need as far as getting things done. And as you mentioned, to not just be another bureaucracy. So, how do you face the challenge of reaching across the aisle?
Um, it's very interesting doing that. My supervisor that represents me, that that I work very closely with, is a Republican. So she's the only Republican out of the other four, and so um, one thing that we know very very well is she's a very interesting Republican, because she is like one of those me personally, I really admire her dedication to education. I admire the work that she has done for our community, for our district, and her leadership. And so for me is when I talk to her and I sit down with her and like, look, these are the concerns that I have, these are the things that I'm missing. What do you think? What are some problems, or how can we solve them together? Who should I talk to? Should I talk to the mayor? Should I talk to the assembly member? Who is the best person to help build that coalition with me? And so I think at the end of the day, when you sit down with someone who might not have the same philosophical belief as you do, it's very important to come in with that open mindedness again, but also what are you trying to achieve and how you're going to communicate that. And so foster care is a bipartisan issue. Over fostering is a bipartisan issue. Um, when you get into like juvenile justice and homelessness, that can become very, depending on the population, very controversial. But I think it's very important for me to make sure that I go in there and say, hey, um, this is the importance of it, and showing the money, right? Republicans care about how much is it going to cost, um, and what oversight and how long are we going to spend this money, and so it's making sure that you do your homework, you do your research, and you come back with, if we do this, we can save money in these two areas, right? And that is our role, is to show them like, if we spend money and this is going to help us with this and this project. Um, and so I think
So,
it's very,
oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry. So I just want to see. So reaching across the aisle is being open-minded and desiring of communication, finding common ground, and then also show me the money. Seems to be, yes. Let's see where we have these commonalities, and then you really mentioned a great one as far as some issues just are not partisan themselves, and and they're more human nature. We want to resolve this issue. How can we both meet on this bridge together? So that's the reaching across the aisle, correct?
correct.
And I think we both can agree that's what we're searching for now, is where whichever political side of the spectrum you're on is finding commonality, though might have different approaches. So in some of your approaches, Commissioner, and staying in line with different approaches, I would imagine some of your approaches don't meet with the other side of the aisle. So your challenge in serving your communities, it definitely has to be, maybe the forefront of that is staying open-minded to have words of communication where you both can find a common ground.
Yeah, I think it's very, when you're talking to Republicans, is more about, especially when I was running for office, my area was very Republican, right? And so it was more of like, okay, tell me where you stand on this issue. Like, tell me, if you had a magic wand, how will you address this issue, or what would be um, the requirements for this project to come forward for you. And a lot of them was very common sense. It was like, I don't want them spending billions of dollars and putting me into debt. I don't want, people spending all these money without no oversight or putting requirements on that. And that's very common sense in my view
Yeah,
of,
for sure.
if I'm picking up the tab for this, I want to make sure my money is going where it's going to go.
Absolutely.
So I think it was more of, they were not against those social issues. It was more of, does it come out of my pocket or not? And if it does,
Please forgive me about my dogs.
You're good. So I think it's more of having and honestly it goes back to being okay with being um, being okay with having confrontation in your conversations.
I'm shaking my head, Commissioner. Forgive me. I know they shouldn't be barking that loud, and I apologize to you and my audience for hearing that. No, but that makes a great deal of sense. Now, in it, within this term that you're on, where do you see your 5 year plan?
Well, I unfortunately am coming to an end to my term, so I am closing my term out I think in August. So I'm just kind of making sure my district has the adequate resources, start implementing my succession plan, as well to making sure my work continues to be built out with other next leader that comes from this, but also making sure that um, I support that person in any capacity that I can, and making sure my partners and nonprofits that I'm able to take that person into different spaces, introducing that person, and again, one thing that I am very big on is, being a leader doesn't mean you have to be the forefront of the person all the time. It's making sure that you prepare the next generation and say, I want to take your spot. And I like it when young people come to tell me, I'm going to take your job. And I'm like, good, because I don't want this job forever. I don't want to be in office forever. I want to have the confidence that when someone else comes, my job is not going to go down the drain. All the work that I've done for 4 years, I don't want it to go down the drain because I cannot afford it to go down the drain. Other young people in my constituency expect me to work for them, and so I'm very excited for that. I'm very excited to pass this on to the next leader who's going to be leading our district for the next 2 to 4 years or however long they want to take into. And I'm more excited about moving on to different things.
I was, which leads me. What's next for Commissioner Ricardo Ortega? What's next for you?
Honestly, I think for me is I want to make sure that now that I have all this wealth of knowledge, is helping the county a little bit more in the new transformation that's coming up. So I wish to work on the task force who's going to be expecting our board and what does that look like. So hopefully that might be an adventure. Another adventure might be returning to the nonprofit sector. So maybe leading a nonprofit, being an executive director for our community when it comes to. I'm starting to dig into the new self sustainability.
Oh
So
wow, very interesting.
how does that work out for a community, right? When society has access to water, has access to treatment, has access to entertainment, finances, what happens to society when all your basic necessities are achieved? What does that look like? What happens? How does society change now that you don't rely on different sectors to help you when you have it and you can make it on your own? What does that look like? And so I'm looking into that a little bit more and kind of
It's
figuring
a
what does.
fascinating field, I tell you. It's very fascinating having some associates and some longtime friends who are into that a great deal. And so I know we can have some great conversations. We can have some great conversations related to that. And I got to say, I know that part of our goal is to look for new ways to help push our society forward, and that is one of the next edge of things as far as where we're going. So it's definitely worthwhile for all of us to investigate it further. And I myself am doing that, and I have loved ones who are a part of that community who have been saying, "We told you about this 10 years ago." Type of thing. So it's very interesting. So no further political aspirations for you.
I think there is an opportunity for me. I don't want to leave all the work to be done. There's a lot more to do, and so one of the areas that I'm looking into is to run for school board in 2026 for the Antelope Valley Union High School District. Maybe that's a possibility there that I'm looking into. Another one, there's maybe running for state senate. That's another opportunity down the line. So I haven't really made my decision yet on what I'm going to do, but I know I want to stay committed to the community, to Valley community. Fell in love with this community. My nieces are going to school here. I bought my home here, so I have mortgage to pay. And so I'm here. I'm here, and I want to make sure that people who call the Phantom Valley High Desert home have access to what they need to do. And the biggest important part of me is mentorship. How am I mentoring the next generation who are going to be here longer than I am, who are barely starting? So I see that as my niece before when I decided to run for state assembly didn't know what that was. And 6 months into the campaign, she started telling her teachers that I'm running for state assembly for District 34, blah blah blah. And she was only 7 years old. And so
Wow.
that's what I like to see. That's what I want to see moving forward. Exposing young people to different possibilities and different professional career paths. And so I'm very excited for that, and whatever that might be, there in the school board, on the state senate side, or on the nonprofit sector side, I'll continue to do that.
Well, I got to tell you, it does sound exciting. And you brought up a couple of different things. Have you been familiar with the Young Senators and/or Youth in Government that goes through YMCA? Because those are two huge programs that I've been involved with myself, and it's what brought the Youth Commission to my attention as well. Are you familiar with either one of those programs?
Yeah, I actually didn't get to do the YMCA one, but I got to do the Young Senators program with former State Senator Ricardo Lara, who is now a
Oh,
commissioner.
fantastic.
So that's how I kind of started, got a feel for community service. And so that was back 2017, 2018, around that time as well. And so I was a Young Senators for District 33, and got to experience that under his leadership and under his support and mentorship. There were 33 young senators from around the district out of 400. I think it was 600 at that time, 600 applicants. And so he chose 33 of us to be part of his cohort. That's how I started. And then from there, I kind of moved into the Immigration Commission under Assembly Member Mike Gibson. I was at that time 17 years old. So I was digging into, back during the first Trump administration, what was going on during that time. And so I was the youngest commissioner on that. Um, so I got exposed to also another position called the Civil Service Commission. Not sure if you heard about it, but is a one that oversees all the employees of a city or of a county, and you get to be the final judgment on their employment. And so I got appointed to that in the city of Huntington Park when I was 18 years old. So I was making decisions for people's livelihoods at that young age. And so that exposed me to how to balance that. You hear the person, you hear why they did what they did, but at the end of the day, you have to take into account the city charter and what the law says or what the contract says. And so it was very interesting. I mean, that teaches you a whole nother level of how to function in a bureaucracy.
They really do. I find them completely very valuable. And I know numerous of the young people I worked with in the years of my work with YMCA Youth in Government and the Young Senators and even the civil service. And then there's the neighborhood councils and city council, which was another program I worked with. I find not only do they teach young people the inner workings of them, but they give them a passion for being a part of the process. So I'm glad we were able to touch on that as well.
Yeah.
Commissioner, I know your time is extremely valuable. I wanted to see if there were any gems you want to leave with the Makers Bar audience before you go today.
I mean, I want to say thank you again for this opportunity and for reaching out. I'm very excited to see what the next generation of leaders look like. And the out of the box thinking that is very important. We need in government. We need
Absolutely.
to have people who are in leadership who bring other perspective and out of the box thinking, but also making sure that we look into who is coming after, who are we actually serving, and also making sure that we reflect is very important. Reflection is very key
Absolutely.
for us, and so I would like to leave that with folks is making sure that we bring that other mentality to it. Also very patient, very we need that too. That's something that we're losing, and also being open minded. is very, very important, especially with the new generation of leaders who are very passionate about an issue. Is also making sure that your issue is not the only issue. There's other people who have other issues. They think their issue is the number one thing. So that's what I will say, and hopefully we can continue to build on that, and expressing those issues and those areas of need for governmental institutions, elected officials, appointed officials, and just communities in general.
Again, please forgive me. I'm going to check on them in a little bit. This is not a good thing. But, Commissioner, it has been really a pleasure, and I'm hoping that we can do a follow-up interview with you. Thank you so much for taking out the time with us and make us for our audience today. We truly appreciate your time, your work, and your efforts, and you're truly an inspiration. And it's in particular to me that you were one of the youngest commissioners in your role. That's extremely important to me because 15 years, that was a big part of my life. So thank you, Commissioner Ricardo Ortega. We really do appreciate it.
Of course, thank you so much.
Thank you. Maker's Bar, we are pleased to have Maker's Bar is beginning its depth into the waters of political elected officials and persons interested in that. And so this is the beginning of that. We are extremely honored and humbled to have Commissioner Ortega with us today. And as you see going forward, Maker's Bar will be a part of the ongoing conversations in a bipartisan way, minus dog barking. We want to thank you for joining us today, Maker's Bar. I leave you with this, as I say at the end of each broadcast: the Lovolution is the revolution that begins with you. You make all those efforts in going forward. We are extremely pleased that you've chosen to select us as the podcasters you're listening today. Please check out Commissioner Ortega and his efforts. If there's any way you can help support some of his efforts, finances, resources, building in any capacity, please reach out to the commissioner and let them know. It's the work that they're doing that we want to be able to support with all of our efforts, and it's we as a team who make a difference. For Maker's Bar, it's your boy Seth Garu Baxter with Commissioner Ricardo Ortega today. We're saying good evening to you, and we look forward to seeing you again. Peace and one love.